relatively easy to port something like a voice assistant to another operating system. Getting all the integrations with the device, being able to the device's sensor values and things like that, that maybe needs to be ported, but it's not impossible. So I wouldn't worry so much about the operating system itself. I mean, you could imagine, for example, Samsung could definitely release Bixby for iOS. Again, it would require some effort to port. It's not outside the realm of possibility. Like, that is entirely possible. That, you know, they would think that's a priority and get Bixby over to iOS. Google Assistant, I think you can get it for iOS. I haven't looked at that recently, but I mean, Google has all the stuff running on Android and iOS days, and so I would imagine if Google Assistant doesn't work yet on iOS, that it will soon. I'm pretty sure it already does work on iOS. So I wouldn't worry about the specifics of which OS things are on. These days, everything eventually runs on everything. So, you know, lock-in, as far as lock-in, you know, if again, what I said before, probably the reason why Apple didn't do so well with their home-based devices is partly because everybody was so locked in on their phones. So lock-in can be a good thing for retaining customers, but in the case of Apple, I think they shut themselves out of another market share in the home sector by having people be so tied to their phones and so loyal to their phones.
Well, like, I have a comment and a question about that too. Like, it looks like the smartphone manufacturers are developing their own proprietary, like, virtual assistants. You mentioned Apple Siri and Samsung Bixby. But, like, when it comes to home, since we're focused on the home domain, the CE manufacturers, right, like TV or home appliances, they're using the third-party virtual assistants. Like, a lot of those, like, home appliances are connected to Alexa, and there are some others that are connected to the Google Assistants. So how do you think the value of the virtual assistant is different for these consumer electronics companies? And, like, you know, like, how will it be adopted to the home appliances in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a space that is still being very much figured out. If you have multiple Google Home devices in your home, and you have Google Assistant on your phone, sometimes when you say, okay, Google, or hey, Google, multiple devices respond, and they actually, Google, in fact, they all used to give you the answer if they could all hear you. And it was a problem for the first few months of the life of Google Home. And then Google actually pushed out an update that when any Google devices are on the same Wi-Fi hotspot, if more than one gets triggered at the same time, then they all talk to each other and they sort out which one has the loudest, you know, volume and the microphone. That one gets to answer the question. So they shut each other down. In fact, if you say, okay, Google, and you have a phone and a Google Home, you'll see both of them light up and then one of them will shut down. So they're trying to address this, but it's still not perfect. I mean, still, I have a Google Home device and Google and an Android phone, and still sometimes they both answer. You know, so if you have your TV as well and every set of speakers and everything else all using these voice interfaces, it has to be coordinated better than is done right now. It doesn't work very well, and there's got to be a smart way to coordinate all these devices, but nobody has a good solution for that yet. So it's going to take some complex development. Also, the acoustics are different in different places in your home, like different rooms, you know, even different positions for the microphone within the room. The sound quality is going to be different for each device. There'll be network latencies depending on how a device is connected, if it's plugged into Ethernet versus which a Google Home device, the Google Wi-Fi router. There's a home device that's a Wi-Fi router, and it has an Ethernet port. And then there's a home device that is only on Wi-Fi, and those actually have different latencies. So how does that affect the way that these all work together on the network? I mean, there's just these sorts of questions, you know. That has different CPU speeds, and so they might actually process the results at a different rate. And then there's something called a race condition, which is everything's racing to give you the result at the same time. How do you make sure that only one of those gets through? So, you know, as far as filling your whole home full of smart devices, or even just putting them in all of the expensive electronics like TVs and things, for me, I don't think it makes sense. Here's a similar question, just to